My name is Veronica Leo, and 3 months ago I was the kind of woman who believed in fairy tales. I was 26, worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized advertising firm, and had spent 5 years of my life loving a man who I thought loved me back. I wore my heart on my sleeve, believed the best in people, and thought that loyalty and devotion were enough to build a life on. I was wrong about everything. The story begins on a Friday night in June at O'Malley's bar on 5th Street. It was supposed to be a celebration. Axel had finally saved enough money for the ring we'd been talking about for months. We were going to announce our engagement to his friends, maybe set a date, start planning the future we'd dreamed about since we were 21. I remember everything about that night with painful clarity. The way the neon beer signs cast colored shadows across the wooden tables. The smell of fried food and stale cigarettes. The sound of laughter that would soon turn into the soundtrack of my destruction. Axel looked handsome that night in his navy button-down shirt, the one I'd bought him for his birthday. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and his green eyes sparkled with what I thought was excitement about our future. I wore a white sundress, one he'd complimented before, and I'd spent an hour on my makeup, wanting to look perfect for our special announcement. We arrived at 8 o'clock to find his two best friends already there. Easton Mott and Miles Jasper. I'd known them both for years, had cooked them dinner, remembered their birthdays, listened to their relationship problems, and thought of them as the brothers I'd never had. How naive I was. "There's the happy couple," Easton called out as we approached their table. He was a tall, lanky man with prematurely thinning hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. "Axel's been texting us all day about some big news." Miles grinned and raised his beer. "About time, man. 5 years is long enough to keep any girl waiting." He was shorter than Easton, stocky and loud, with the kind of aggressive personality that made waitresses uncomfortable and bartenders wary. I slid into the booth beside Axel, my heart hammering with excitement. This was it. The moment we'd been building toward for half a decade. I reached for his hand under the table, expecting him to squeeze it back the way he always did. Instead he pulled away. "Actually, guys," Axel said, his voice strangely tight, "that's what I wanted to talk to you about." Something cold settled in my stomach. The way he said it, the way he wouldn't meet my eyes, the way his shoulders tensed like he was preparing for battle. It all felt wrong. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice smaller than I intended. Axel finally looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Something that looked almost like pity. "Veronica, I've been thinking a lot lately, and I'm not sure about this whole marriage thing." The words hit me like a physical blow. The noise of the bar seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. "What?" I whispered. "I mean, 5 years is a long time and we're still young. Maybe we rushed into this whole engagement idea. Maybe we should slow down, think about what we really want." Easton and Miles exchanged a look across the table. I caught it, that quick glance that said they'd known this was coming. They'd known and I hadn't. "Axel," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, "we talked about this. We've been planning this for months. You said you were ready. You said you wanted to spend your life with me." "I know what I said," he replied, his voice taking on an edge of irritation. "But saying something and feeling it are different things, aren't they?" The cruelty in his tone was like ice water in my veins. This wasn't the man who'd whispered, "I love you," to me that very morning. This wasn't the man who'd held me while I cried about losing my job last year, who'd promised me that we'd face everything together. "Besides," Miles chimed in, leaning forward with a smirk, "you guys have been together since college. Don't you think you should see what else is out there before you settle down?" "Exactly," Easton added. "There are so many fish in the sea. Why tie yourself down to the first one you caught?" They were talking about me like I wasn't even there. Like I was an object, a burden, something to be discarded when it was no longer convenient. "Guys," I said, trying to inject some levity into the conversation, trying to salvage something from this nightmare. "We love each other. That's what matters, right? Love conquers all." The three of them looked at me, and then something happened that I still replay in my nightmares. Axel started to laugh. Not a kind laugh, not an affectionate chuckle, but a cold, mocking sound that cut through me like broken glass. "Love," he said, shaking his head. "You know what, Veronica? If you were prettier, maybe I'd marry you. But let's be honest here." The world stopped. Everything, the music, the conversations, the clinking of glasses, it all just stopped. I felt like I was falling through space, through time, through the foundation of everything I'd believed about myself and my life. What did you say? I whispered. I said if you were prettier maybe I'd marry you, Axel repeated, his voice louder now, performing for his friends. I mean, look around this place. Look at the women here. Then look at yourself. Easton burst into laughter. Dude, that's harsh but fair. I mean, Veronica's nice and all, but she's not exactly model material. Right. Miles joined in, his voice gaining confidence. Axel, you could do so much better. You're a good-looking guy with a decent job. You don't have to settle. Settle. The word hung in the air like poison gas. After 5 years, after all the promises and plans and dreams, I was something he would be settling for. That's not true, I said, my voice breaking despite my efforts to stay strong. Axel, you don't mean that. You can't mean that. But when I looked at his face, I saw the truth. He did mean it. Every word. And worse than that, he was enjoying this. He was enjoying watching me break apart in front of his friends, enjoying the way they laughed at my expense, enjoying the power he held over my heart. Come on, Veronica, he said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone men use when they want to make you feel small. You have to know you're not the prettiest girl I've ever been with. I mean, remember Jessica from college? Remember how guys used to turn their heads when she walked by? You've never had that effect on anyone. Jessica. His ex-girlfriend from sophomore year. The one he'd claimed meant nothing to him, the one he'd sworn he'd forgotten about. The comparison was deliberate, designed to cut as deeply as possible. And it worked. That's cold, man, Easton said, but he was still smiling. True but cold. Sometimes the truth hurts, Miles added. But it's better to be honest now than to wake up in 10 years wondering what if, right? They continued talking about me like I was a car they were considering purchasing, weighing my features like items on a pro and con list. My nose was too big. My smile was crooked. I was too pale, too thin, not curvy enough. Each observation was delivered with casual cruelty, as if they were discussing the weather. I sat there in that booth, wearing the white dress I'd chosen because Axel once said it made me look like an angel, listening to the man I loved catalog every physical flaw he'd apparently been cataloging for 5 years. The man who'd seen me without makeup countless mornings, who'd held me when I was sick, who'd traced every inch of my body with reverent hands. That man was now explaining to his friends why I wasn't good enough to marry. The worst part wasn't even the words themselves. It was the laughter. The way they fed off each other's cruelty, building it higher and higher until I felt like I was drowning in it. The way other patrons in the bar began to notice, began to turn and stare at the girl being systematically destroyed at table 7. You know what I think? Easton said, leaning back in his chair like a king on his throne. I think you should break up with her tonight. Rip the band-aid off. She'll cry for a while but she'll get over it. And you'll be free to find someone who actually deserves you. Someone hot, Miles added. Someone who makes other guys jealous instead of confused about what you're doing with her. They laughed again, and this time Axel laughed with them. The sound was like glass breaking inside my chest. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember gathering my purse or walking toward the door. All I remember is the sudden clarity that came with absolute devastation. The understanding that the life I'd built, the future I'd planned, the love I'd believed in, all of it was a lie. I was halfway to the exit when I heard Axel call my name. Veronica, wait. Don't be dramatic. Come back and finish your drink. I turned around slowly. The entire bar was watching now, dozens of strangers witnessing my humiliation. Axel sat there with his friends, looking annoyed rather than sorry, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Don't be dramatic? I repeated, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet space. You just spent 10 minutes explaining to your friends why I'm too ugly to marry and I'm being dramatic? I was just being honest, he said, his tone defensive. I thought you could handle honesty. I thought that's what you wanted from me. Honest. As if honesty was some noble virtue instead of a weapon he'd used to cut me down in public. As if telling the truth gave him the right to be cruel. You're right, I said, and my voice was steady now, calm in a way that surprised me. I do want honesty. So let me be honest with you, Axel. You're a coward. A pathetic, cruel coward who doesn't have the decency to break up with someone privately. You had to do it here in front of your friends so they could cheer you on and make you feel like a big man. His face reddened. Now wait a minute. No, I'm not done. The words were flowing out of me now, 5 years of suppressed frustrations and ignored red flags finally finding their voice. You want to know what I think? I think you're terrified. Terrified of commitment, terrified of growing up, terrified of being seen as the small, insecure man you really are. So you have to tear me down to build yourself up. You have to make me the problem so you don't have to face the fact that you're the one who's not ready for marriage. The bar was dead silent now. Even the music seemed to have stopped. And your friends, I continued, looking at Easton and Miles, you're even worse. You sit there laughing at someone else's pain because it makes you feel better about your own miserable lives. Easton, you've been alone for 3 years because no woman can stand your passive-aggressive bullshit for more than a month. And Miles, your girlfriend cheated on you twice last year, and you took her back both times because you're too desperate to be alone. Both men's faces had gone pale. I'd hit nerves, exposed truths they'd probably never admitted to themselves. So congratulations, I said, looking back at Axel. You're free. Free to find someone prettier, someone who won't challenge you or expect you to be a decent human being. I hope she makes you very happy. I turned to leave again, but this time Axel stood up. Veronica, you can't just walk away. We need to talk about this like adults. I stopped without turning around. Adults, I said. Adults don't humiliate people they claim to love in front of a room full of strangers. Adults don't spend 5 years with someone they think is too ugly for them. Adults have something you clearly lack, basic human decency. And then I walked out of O'Malley's bar and into the warm summer night, leaving behind 5 years of my life and every naive belief I'd ever held about love and loyalty and the goodness of people. I cried all the way home. I cried in my car, I cried in my apartment, I cried until my eyes were swollen shut and my chest ached from sobbing. I cried for the woman I'd been, trusting, hopeful, foolishly in love. I cried for the future that had died in that booth, for the children I'd imagined having with Axel, for the house we'd planned to buy, for the life that would never exist. But when I woke up the next morning, something had changed. The tears were gone, replaced by something harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. I was done crying. I was done being the victim in Axel Landon's story. It was time to write my own. Before we continue, please write in the comment which country you are watching this video. We love knowing where our global family is tuning in from. And if this is your first time on this channel, please subscribe. Your support helps us bring even more epic revenge tales of life. Enjoy listening. The first few weeks after that night were a blur of pain and planning. I took sick leave from work, telling my concerned colleagues that I had the flu. In reality, I was experiencing a different kind of sickness, the nauseating process of seeing your entire life clearly for the first time. I spent hours analyzing every moment of our relationship, looking for signs I'd missed, patterns I'd ignored. They were there, of course. They'd always been there. The way Axel would joke about my appearance when he'd been drinking. The way he'd encourage me to wear makeup even when we were just staying home. The way he'd suggested I might want to join a gym or try a new hairstyle or consider contact lenses instead of glasses. I'd interpreted all of it as caring. As a boyfriend who wanted me to look my best. Now I saw it for what it really was. A man slowly, methodically chipping away at my self-confidence, conditioning me to believe that I wasn't good enough so that I'd be grateful for whatever scraps of affection he threw my way. The manipulation had been masterful in its subtlety. During those weeks of isolation, I learned things about myself that 5 years with Axel had made me forget. I learned that I was intelligent, not just book smart but strategically intelligent. I learned that I had a capacity for patience that bordered on supernatural. And I learned that somewhere beneath the people-pleasing, conflict-avoiding woman I'd become, there was someone much stronger. Someone who was very, very angry. My mother called repeatedly during this period. Sweet, well-meaning mom who'd always adored Axel, who'd been planning our wedding in her head since we started dating. Honey, are you sure you don't want to talk to him? She'd ask during our brief phone conversations. He's called here 4 times looking for you. He sounds so sorry. Maybe you two just need to work through this rough patch. I never told her exactly what happened that night. How could I explain to my mother that the man she'd welcomed into our family, the man she'd bought Christmas presents for and invited to Sunday dinner, had publicly listed all the reasons I was too ugly to love? Some humiliations are too deep to share even with the people who love you most. We're done, Mom, I'd say and change the subject. But Axel wasn't giving up that easily. After a week of unreturned calls, he started showing up at my apartment. I'd watch from my window as he stood on the sidewalk, sometimes for hours, occasionally shouting up at my building that he was sorry, that we needed to talk, that I was being unreasonable. The sorry felt hollow. The need to talk felt manipulative. And the accusation that I was being unreasonable, that made me smile. A cold, sharp smile that would have terrified the old Veronica. His friends started reaching out too. Easton sent a long text message explaining that they'd all been drinking that night, that they didn't mean the things they'd said, that I should give Axel another chance. Miles left voicemails that grew increasingly frustrated with my silence, eventually accusing me of being overdramatic and unforgiving. The audacity was breathtaking. The same men who'd laughed at my pain now wanted to lecture me about forgiveness. They wanted me to absolve them of their cruelty so they could go back to seeing themselves as good guys who just made a little mistake. I deleted every message without responding. 3 weeks after that night at O'Malley's, something interesting happened. I was at the grocery store wearing dark sunglasses and a baseball cap, trying to remain invisible, when I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I heard Axel Landon got dumped, a woman was saying to her friend as they examined apples in the produce section. Can you believe it? That gorgeous man single again. Really? Her friend replied. What happened? His girlfriend couldn't handle that he wanted to keep his options open. Apparently she got all clingy and possessive when he suggested they slow things down. You know how some women get, they hit a certain age and suddenly they're desperate to get married. I stood there in the cereal aisle, listening to my story being rewritten in real time. In Axel's version I was the villain. I was the desperate, clingy girlfriend who couldn't respect his need for space. The humiliation, the cruelty, the deliberate destruction of my self-worth. None of that existed in his narrative. That night I sat in my apartment and faced a choice. I could continue hiding, letting Axel control the story, allowing him and his friends to paint me as the bitter ex-girlfriend who couldn't handle the truth. I could move away, start over somewhere new and spend the rest of my life as the victim of their cruelty. Or I could do something else entirely. I opened my laptop and began to research. Knowledge, I discovered, is the most powerful weapon in existence. For the next month I became a student of human psychology, of social dynamics, of the art of influence and persuasion. I read books on manipulation tactics, studied case studies of psychological warfare, learned about the subtle ways people could be guided toward their own destruction. I wasn't planning anything violent or illegal. That would have been too simple, too crude. What I was planning was far more elegant. I was going to let Axel Landon destroy himself. I was just going to create the conditions that would make it inevitable. The beautiful thing about truly narcissistic people is how predictable they are. They have patterns, weaknesses, blind spots that can be exploited by someone patient enough to wait and clever enough to see them. Axel was no exception. Through careful observation, and yes, I'll admit it, some light social media stalking, I learned that he'd been telling people we'd broken up because I'd given him an ultimatum. Marriage or nothing. He painted himself as a victim of my unrealistic expectations, a free spirit crushed by a controlling woman's demands. The story made him look sympathetic while making me look desperate. It was perfect for him and it told me everything I needed to know about his psychology. Axel needed to be seen as the victim in every situation. He needed external validation to function. And most importantly, he had no tolerance for public embarrassment. I also learned about his family situation, information I'd somehow never fully absorbed during our 5 years together. His mother, Juanita, was a deeply religious woman who'd raised Axel and his sister after their father left when Axel was 12. She was the type of person who believed in the fundamental goodness of people, who couldn't imagine someone she loved being deliberately cruel. She'd always liked me, had always treated me like a daughter. During our relationship, she'd often mention how excited she was for us to get married, how she couldn't wait for grandchildren. She was, in many ways, more invested in our relationship than Axel had ever been. His sister, Carmen, was younger, 22, still in college and struggling with anxiety and depression. She'd looked up to Axel her entire life, saw him as her protector, her role model. The idea that her beloved big brother could be capable of cruelty would devastate her. These were good people who loved a man who wasn't worthy of their love. Under normal circumstances, I would have felt terrible about involving them in my plans. But these weren't normal circumstances and I wasn't the same person I'd been before that night at O'Malley's. Besides, I wasn't planning to hurt them. I was planning to open their eyes. The plan began to take shape slowly, carefully. It was important that nothing could be traced back to me, that every step appeared to be the natural consequence of Axel's own choices and character flaws. I would simply nudge things along. Phase 1 was information gathering. I needed to understand Axel's current situation completely. Where was he working? Who was he spending time with? What were his routines, his habits, his vulnerabilities? This proved easier than expected. Axel was not a careful man when it came to privacy settings on social media. His Instagram was public, his Facebook posts were visible to friends of friends, and he had a tendency to check in at locations constantly, broadcasting his movements to anyone who cared to pay attention. I learned that he'd been promoted at his job. He worked in sales at a medical equipment company, and was now making significantly more money than he had when we were together. Money that he was spending on a new wardrobe, expensive dinners, and frequent nights out with Easton and Miles. He was also dating. Or rather, he was attempting to date. His social media showed a series of first and second dates with different women, each one younger and conventionally prettier than I was. None of them seemed to stick around long, which suggested that Axel's charming public persona wasn't quite enough to hide his true nature from perceptive women. But he was trying hard to find someone, posting photos that showed him at galleries and wine tastings and trendy restaurants, clearly trying to present himself as cultured and successful. The desperation was obvious to anyone who knew how to look for it. Perfect. Phase 2 was establishing my new identity. I couldn't execute my plan as the heartbroken ex-girlfriend everyone expected me to be. I needed to become someone else entirely. Someone confident, mysterious, successful, and completely unbothered by Axel Landon's existence. I started with my appearance. Not because I believed Axel's cruel assessment of my looks, but because I understood the power of transformation. I joined an expensive gym and hired a personal trainer. I bought new clothes in styles I'd never tried before, edgier, more confident, more deliberately striking. I got my hair cut and colored by a stylist who cost more per appointment than I used to spend on clothes in a month. The changes were subtle at first, but the cumulative effect was dramatic. I looked like a woman who had her life together, who had reinvented herself after a setback, who had moved on and moved up in the world. I also changed jobs. The marketing position I'd held during my relationship with Axel was fine, but it wasn't impressive. It didn't give me the kind of status and connections I would need for what I was planning. Through a combination of networking, aggressive interviewing, and frankly my new appearance and confidence, I landed a position at one of the city's most prestigious public relations firms. The job came with a significant salary increase, an impressive title, and most importantly, access to people and resources that would prove invaluable in the coming months. By the time I was ready to implement Phase 3, it had been 2 months since that night at O'Malley's. 2 months since I'd been Veronica Leo, the plain girlfriend who wasn't pretty enough to marry. Now I was Veronica Leo, successful PR executive, woman of mystery, phoenix risen from the ashes of someone else's cruelty. It was time to let Axel Landon see what he'd lost. The charity gala was perfect. Exactly the kind of high-profile event where appearances mattered more than substance. The Children's Hospital fundraiser drew hundreds of the city's most influential people, and as the newest employee of Morrison & Associates PR firm, I had not only been invited but tasked with managing media relations for the event. I'd known Axel would be there. His company was one of the sponsors and he'd posted about it on social media weeks in advance, clearly excited about networking with potential clients in such an elegant setting. I arrived fashionably late, wearing a black designer dress that had cost me half a month's salary but was worth every penny. The transformation I'd undergone over the past months wasn't just physical. I moved differently now, carried myself with the kind of confidence that made people turn their heads and wonder who I was. The ballroom was everything you'd expect from a high-end charity event. Elegant decorations, soft lighting, waiters circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres, and dozens of people in expensive evening wear networking with calculated intensity. I spent the first hour working, genuinely managing my responsibilities, coordinating with photographers and ensuring our clients' messaging was being communicated effectively. But I was also watching, waiting for the right moment. I saw Axel before he saw me. He was standing near the bar with 2 men I didn't recognize, probably potential clients. He looked good, I had to admit that. His tuxedo fit perfectly, his hair was styled immaculately, and he had that easy charm that had attracted me to him all those years ago. But now I could see things I'd missed before. The way his eyes constantly scanned the room looking for someone more important to talk to. The way his smile never quite reached his eyes when he thought no one was looking. The subtle signs of insecurity that manifested as overcompensation. He was trying so hard to be impressive that it was almost sad. When he finally spotted me, the reaction was everything I'd hoped for and more. His face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession. Shock, confusion, recognition, and something that might have been desire. I watched him excuse himself from his conversation and begin moving across the room toward me. I pretended not to notice, continuing my conversation with the event photographer while tracking his approach in my peripheral vision. Veronica. I turned slowly as if surprised to see him. Axel. Hi. For a moment he just stared. I could see him trying to reconcile the woman in front of him with the person he'd left crying in O'Malley's bar. This version of me didn't fit his narrative. This version of me looked like someone who'd moved on, moved up, and definitely hadn't spent the last 2 months pining for him. You look. He started, then seemed to lose his words. Thank you, I said simply, not helping him finish the sentence. How are you? I'm good. Great, actually. Really great. He was repeating himself, something he only did when he was nervous. I've been trying to reach you. To talk about things. Have you? I took a sip of my champagne, letting my eyes wander around the room as if his presence wasn't particularly interesting to me. I've been quite busy lately. Busy with what? The question came out sharper than he'd probably intended. There was an edge of possessiveness in his voice that would have once made me feel guilty for making him worry. Now it just made me smile. Work mostly. I changed jobs a few months ago. I'm with Morrison & Associates now. His eyes widened. Morrison & Associates was well known in the city, the kind of firm that only hired the best and brightest. The kind of job that came with prestige, money, and connections. That's amazing, he said, and I could hear the wheels turning in his head. I had no idea you were looking for a new position. There's a lot you don't know about me, Axel. There always was. The comment hit its mark. He shifted uncomfortably, clearly remembering some of the things he'd said that night about how well he knew me, how predictable I was. Veronica, I've been thinking about what happened between us. I think I may have been hasty. Hasty? I interrupted, raising an eyebrow. Is that what we're calling it? He had the grace to look embarrassed. I was drunk and the guys were, you know how they can be. I said things I didn't mean. This was his chance. His opportunity to give me a genuine apology, to show some real remorse for the cruelty he'd displayed. If he'd done that, if he'd shown me that he understood the depth of what he'd done and was truly sorry for it, my plans might have ended right there. Instead he said, I think we should try again. I miss you. Miss me. Not, I was wrong. Not, I'm sorry I humiliated you. Not, I was cruel and you deserved better. Just, I miss you, as if my feelings about what had happened were irrelevant. That's sweet, I said, my voice warm but not encouraging. But I'm seeing someone now. I wasn't, of course. But Axel didn't need to know that. His face changed instantly. The confident expression was replaced by something harder, more familiar. The look he got when things didn't go his way, when he felt entitled to something that was being withheld from him. Already, he asked. It's only been 2 months. It's been 10 weeks, I corrected. And some people don't need years to figure out what they want. The barb landed perfectly. His jaw tightened and I could see him fighting the urge to say something he might regret. Who is he? He asked. No one you know. I glanced around the room theatrically. He should be here somewhere, actually. He had to take a call, but he'll be back soon. This was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. Let Axel spend the rest of the evening wondering which of the successful, attractive men at the gala was dating his ex-girlfriend. Let him imagine me laughing with someone else, being appreciated by someone else, being desired by someone who didn't think I needed to be prettier to deserve love. Veronica, please. Can we at least talk privately? There are things I need to say to you. Before I could respond, a familiar voice interrupted our conversation. Veronica. There you are. I turned to see my colleague James approaching. He was one of the senior partners at the firm, a handsome man in his early 30s who'd been nothing but professional with me since I'd started working there. But he was also charming, successful, and exactly the kind of man who would make Axel feel inadequate. Perfect timing. James, I said warmly, I was just talking to an old friend. Axel Landon, this is James Morrison, one of the partners at my firm. The two men shook hands and I watched Axel size up his competition. James was taller, better dressed, more polished, and radiated the kind of quiet confidence that came from genuine success rather than desperate ambition. Morrison, Axel repeated. As in Morrison and Associates? Guilty, James said with an easy smile. Veronica's been a tremendous addition to our team. We're lucky to have her. I watched the words hit Axel like physical blows. Here was proof that other people valued me, that I was succeeding without him, that maybe, just maybe, he'd made a terrible mistake. Well, I said, placing my hand lightly on James's arm, shall we find our table? I think they're about to start dinner. Of course. James offered me his arm like a proper gentleman. It was nice meeting you, Albert. Axel, I corrected softly. His name is Axel. Right, sorry. Axel. As we walked away, I could feel Axel's eyes burning into my back. I knew he was watching the way James's hand rested on my lower back as he guided me through the crowd, the way other people nodded respectfully at James as we passed, the way I fit so naturally into this world of success and sophistication. I also knew that everything he was feeling, the jealousy, the regret, the desperate need to reclaim what he'd thrown away, was exactly what I'd intended him to feel. Phase 3 was now complete. The seed had been planted. Over the following weeks, I carefully cultivated Axel's growing obsession with winning me back. It was surprisingly easy. All I had to do was live my life, my new, improved life, in strategic visibility and let his imagination do the rest. I made sure to be seen at the right places, the right events with the right people. Not obsessively, not obviously, but just enough that word would get back to him through mutual acquaintances and social media. A photo here of me at an art gallery opening. A casual mention there about my promotion at work. Small breadcrumbs that painted a picture of someone who was thriving. The beauty of social media is that it allows you to craft a narrative with surgical precision. Every post was calculated to show a woman who was confident, successful, and completely uninterested in looking backward. I shared photos of weekend trips to wine country, paid for with my new salary, dinner at expensive restaurants, sometimes alone, which actually looked more mysterious than sad, and professional achievements. The Morrison account I'd landed was genuinely impressive. Meanwhile, through careful observation of his social media and strategic conversations with mutual friends, I tracked Axel's descent into what could only be described as mild obsession. His dating life, which had seemed so promising in those first weeks after our breakup, began to falter. The string of pretty young women who'd briefly appeared in his posts simply vanished. According to Sarah, a mutual friend who remained blissfully unaware of my strategic interest in Axel's personal life, he'd become increasingly difficult to please. It's the weirdest thing, she told me during one of our coffee dates. He keeps finding fault with every girl he meets. Too shallow, too boring, not ambitious enough. It's like he's comparing everyone to some impossible standard. I nodded sympathetically while internally celebrating. The impossible standard was me, or rather the idealized version of me that existed now in his memory, enhanced by loss and regret. Maybe he's just not ready to date again, I suggested innocently. Breakups can be hard, especially when you realize you made a mistake. Did he make a mistake? Sarah asked, leaning forward with interest. I always thought you two were perfect together. I never understood why you broke up. This was my opportunity to begin reshaping the narrative, to plant seeds of doubt about Axel's version of events. I don't really like to talk about it, I said, lowering my voice to that conspiratorial whisper that makes people lean in closer. But let's just say that Axel's memory of what happened might be a bit selective. I didn't elaborate, didn't provide specifics. I just let that tantalizing hint hang in the air, knowing that Sarah's curiosity would do the rest. Within days, I was certain she'd be asking other mutual friends what they knew about our breakup, comparing stories, looking for inconsistencies. The rumor mill was now working in my favor. But the real breakthrough came when I orchestrated what appeared to be a chance encounter at the grocery store where Axel shopped every Sunday morning. I'd learned his routine through his Instagram stories. He was frustratingly predictable about posting photos of his Sunday meal prep sessions. I timed my arrival perfectly, appearing in the produce section just as he was selecting vegetables with the focused intensity of someone trying to prove they had their life together. Axel, I said, feigning surprise. What a coincidence. He spun around so quickly he nearly dropped the bag of organic kale he'd been examining. Veronica. Hi. How are you? I'm wonderful, I said and meant it. Just grabbing a few things for dinner tonight. I watched his eyes take in my appearance. Casual but expensive jeans, a silk blouse that cost more than he used to spend on our anniversary dinners, and the confidence that came from knowing I looked good without trying too hard. Dinner for two? He asked, trying to sound casual. I hummed non-committally, neither confirming nor denying. Let him wonder. Listen, he said, abandoning his vegetables entirely. I know this might sound crazy, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately. About us. About what we had. Have you? I selected a perfect avocado, testing its ripeness with the kind of casual focus that suggested his confession wasn't particularly earth-shattering news. I think I was an idiot, Veronica. I think I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me. This was the closest thing to an apology I'd gotten from him, and it was still entirely focused on his loss rather than my pain. Still no acknowledgement of his cruelty, no recognition of the humiliation he'd subjected me to. We all make choices, I said simply. The important thing is learning from them. But what if I want to unmake some of those choices? What if I want to try again? I looked at him, then really looked at him with the kind of pitying expression one might give a child asking for something impossible. Oh, Axel, I said softly. You can't unmake choices. You can only live with the consequences. The words hit him like a physical blow. I could see it in the way his face fell, the way his shoulders sagged slightly. So that's it? We're just done? Forever. We were done the night you decided to entertain your friends by listing all the reasons I wasn't good enough for you, I said, my voice still gentle but now carrying an edge of steel. Everything else is just details. For a moment I thought he might actually acknowledge what he'd done. I saw something flicker across his face that might have been genuine remorse. But then his defensive walls slammed back into place. I was drunk, Veronica. People say stupid things when they're drunk. You know that's not how I really felt about you. Actually, I said, I think that's exactly how you felt about me. Alcohol doesn't create thoughts, Axel. It just removes the filter that usually keeps us from expressing them. I could see him scrambling for another excuse, another way to minimize what he'd done. But before he could speak, I continued. The sad thing is, you probably genuinely believe that you loved me. But love doesn't mock. Love doesn't humiliate. Love doesn't invite an audience to witness someone's destruction. What you felt for me might have been affection or habit or convenience, but it wasn't love. The words hung between us like a challenge. He could either accept the truth of what I was saying or continue living in his self-serving delusion. I already knew which he'd choose. That's not fair, he said. You're painting me as some kind of monster. I'm not a monster, Veronica. I'm just a guy who made a mistake. Some mistakes are too big to come back from, I replied. Some mistakes reveal who a person really is underneath all their careful pretenses. I moved to walk away, but he caught my arm. Not aggressively, but desperately. Please, he said. Can't we at least try to be friends? I miss having you in my life. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Friends. I repeated. Do you think we could be friends, Axel? Do you think you could be happy for me when I succeed? Could you celebrate my achievements without feeling diminished? Could you watch me be loved by someone else without trying to sabotage it? He opened his mouth to answer, but I held up my free hand to stop him. Don't answer that. We both know the truth. You don't want to be my friend. You want to assuage your guilt by maintaining some connection to me, some evidence that you're not the bad guy in this story. But I'm not responsible for managing your feelings about what you did. That's your job now. I gently removed my arm from his grasp. I hope you find what you're looking for, Axel. I really do. But you're not going to find it with me. As I walked away, I could feel his eyes following me. I knew he was watching me load my groceries into my car, probably noticing the expensive handbag, the confident way I moved through the world, the obvious signs that I was doing just fine without him. And I knew that everything he was feeling, the regret, the loss, the growing certainty that he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, was setting the stage for what would come next. The seeds had been planted and watered. Soon it would be time to watch them grow into something beautiful and terrible. By month 4, Axel's behavior had escalated from regretful to desperate. The man who had once been too good for me was now consumed with winning me back, and his methods were becoming increasingly erratic. Started with gifts. Expensive flowers delivered to my office with handwritten notes apologizing for his momentary lapse in judgment. Designer jewelry sent to my apartment with cards begging for another chance. Elaborate gestures that were meant to demonstrate his sincerity but only proved how little he understood about what he'd actually done wrong. I returned every gift unopened, which seemed to drive him to even more extreme measures. He began showing up at places where he knew I'd be. Not stalking exactly, he was too smart for anything that could be construed as harassment, but convenient appearances that were clearly orchestrated. If I posted about attending a gallery opening, he'd happen to be there. If I mentioned a new restaurant on social media, he'd coincidentally show up for dinner. Each encounter followed the same pattern. He'd approach with that boyish smile that had once charmed me, make small talk about work or mutual friends, then gradually steer the conversation toward us, toward what we'd had, toward what we could have again. And each time I responded with polite distance. I was never cruel, never dramatic, never gave him anything that could be used as evidence of lingering emotion. I was simply uninterested, pleasant but unmoved, cordial but cold. This drove him absolutely insane. The man who had once taken my devotion for granted couldn't understand how I could be so indifferent to his attention. In his narcissistic worldview, my lack of response wasn't evidence that I'd moved on. It was evidence that I was playing hard to get, that I was testing him, that if he just tried hard enough he could win me back. Meanwhile, I was carefully documenting everything. Screenshots of his increasingly desperate text messages. Photos of the gifts he sent. Records of every coincidental encounter. Not because I planned to use them legally, but because I wanted a complete record of his psychological unraveling. It was fascinating in a clinical way to watch someone self-destruct in slow motion. The turning point came when he involved his family. I was working late at the office one evening when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Juanita's name, and for a moment my careful composure slipped. Whatever game Axel was playing, his mother didn't deserve to be dragged into it. "Hello, Mrs. Landon," I answered, genuinely unsure of what to expect. "Veronica, sweetheart," came her familiar warm voice, though I could hear strain underneath the affection. "I hope you don't mind me calling. I got your number from Axel." Of course he'd given her my number. Probably presented it as a gesture of trust and transparency rather than a manipulation tactic. "I don't mind," I said carefully. "How are you doing?" "I'm worried, honey. I'm worried about my son." And there was the reason for the call, delivered with the kind of maternal concern that was impossible to fake. "What do you mean?" I asked, though I already knew. "He's not been himself since you two, since things ended between you. He won't eat properly, he's lost weight, and all he talks about is how much he misses you, how he made a mistake. I've never seen him like this." I felt a flicker of something that might have been guilt, but I pushed it down. Axel's emotional state was the consequence of his own actions, not my responsibility to fix. "I'm sorry to hear that he's struggling," I said sincerely. "But Mrs. Landon, surely you understand that I can't." "I know, sweetheart. I know you don't owe him anything. But I was hoping, maybe you could just talk to him? As a friend? I think if he could just see you, if you could just tell him there's no hope, maybe he could start moving forward." The request was reasonable, delivered with genuine maternal love, and it put me in an impossible position. How could I explain to this sweet woman that her son had publicly humiliated me? How could I tell her that the man she'd raised to be kind and decent had shown his true colors in the cruelest way possible? "Mrs. Landon," I said gently, "I don't think that would be helpful for either of us. Some relationships end in ways that make friendship impossible." "Did he hurt you?" she asked suddenly, her voice sharp with the protective instinct of a mother who was finally asking the right questions. I hesitated. This was my opportunity to tell the truth, to explain exactly what her son had done. But something held me back. Maybe it was respect for her, maybe it was strategy, or maybe it was the recognition that destroying her illusions about Axel would serve no purpose except cruelty. "He made choices that showed me who he really was," I said finally. "And those choices made it clear that we want different things from life." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. "I see," she said quietly, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. Not disappointment in me, but the kind of profound sadness that comes when a parent realizes their child isn't who they thought they were. "I'm sorry," I added. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "No, sweetheart. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have called. This isn't your burden to bear." After we hung up, I sat in my empty office and felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Genuine sadness. Not for Axel, not for our relationship, but for the collateral damage that was inevitable when someone showed their true nature. Juanita was a good person who loved her son and couldn't understand why the woman who'd once seemed perfect for him now wanted nothing to do with him. But my moment of sadness was brief. I had work to do. 2 days later, Axel's sister Carmen called. Veronica. Her voice was small, uncertain, younger than her 22 years. Carmen, hi. How are you, honey? I'm okay, I guess. Listen, I know this is weird and I know Mom already called you, but I'm really worried about Axel. What's going on? I asked, though I suspected I knew. He's been drinking too much, staying out all night, missing work sometimes. And he keeps talking about you, about how he messed everything up, about how he needs to find a way to make you forgive him. The drinking was new information and it shifted something in my chest. I'd wanted Axel to experience regret, to understand what he'd lost, but I hadn't intended to drive him toward self-destruction. Carmen, I can't help with this. Whatever Axel is going through, he needs to work through it himself or maybe with a professional. I know. But Veronica, what did he do? He won't tell us exactly what happened, just that he said some things he didn't mean when he was drunk. But it had to be pretty bad for you to cut him off completely, right? You loved him so much. There was a pleading quality to her voice that broke my heart. She was trying to understand how her hero brother had fallen so far, so fast. Some things can't be taken back, I said softly. Some words, once spoken, change everything. But people make mistakes when they're drunk. People say stupid things. Carmen, I interrupted gently, alcohol doesn't create thoughts. It just removes the inhibitions that usually keep us from expressing them. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. The line was quiet for a long moment. He really hurt you, didn't he? She said finally. Yes, I admitted. He did. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Veronica. I thought maybe if I asked you to give him another chance. You're being a good sister, I told her. You love him and you want to help him. But this isn't something you can fix. After Carmen hung up, I realized that phase 4 of my plan had begun without my conscious initiation. Axel's family was starting to ask questions, starting to piece together the truth about what kind of man their beloved son and brother really was. I hadn't orchestrated their growing disillusionment, but I could certainly guide it. Chapter 7. The Revelation. The confrontation I'd been building toward came sooner than expected, triggered by an event I couldn't have planned but was perfectly positioned to exploit. It was a Saturday night and I was having dinner with James Morrison and several other colleagues at an upscale restaurant downtown. What had started as a working dinner to discuss a major client presentation had evolved into a more relaxed evening, and I was genuinely enjoying myself when I spotted a familiar figure at the bar. Axel was there with Easton and Miles, and from their body language and flushed faces, they'd been drinking for some time. I watched them for a moment, noting the way Axel kept scanning the restaurant, probably hoping to spot me or at least someone who might know where I was on a Saturday night. When our eyes met across the room, I saw his face light up with a mixture of hope and determination that I recognized all too well. He was going to approach our table. He was going to make some grand gesture, probably fueled by liquid courage and the encouragement of his equally intoxicated friends. Perfect. I excused myself from the table and intercepted him halfway across the restaurant. Axel, I said quietly, you're drunk. Go home. Veronica. He was louder than necessary, drawing attention from nearby diners. I was hoping I'd see you tonight. This is perfect. No, it's not perfect. It's embarrassing. You're making a scene. I don't care, he said, swaying slightly. I need to talk to you. I need to tell you something. Behind him, I could see Easton and Miles watching with the kind of anticipation that suggested they'd been encouraging this confrontation all evening. There's nothing you need to tell me, I said firmly. And certainly nothing that can't wait until you're sober. But there is, he insisted, grabbing my arm. I need to tell you that I love you. I need to tell you that I was wrong, that I was stupid, that I can't live without you. His voice was getting louder and I could see other diners beginning to turn and stare. At my table, James and the others were watching with expressions of concern and curiosity. Axel, you're drunk and you're causing a scene. Let go of my arm. I won't let go, he said, his grip tightening. Not until you listen to me. Not until you give me another chance. And there was the moment I'd been waiting for. Axel, drunk and desperate, holding on to me against my will in a crowded restaurant while demanding things he had no right to demand. The perfect demonstration of his true character for an audience that included my professional colleagues and dozens of strangers. Let go of me, I said again, my voice carrying clearly across the restaurant's suddenly quiet dining room. Just listen to me, he pleaded, oblivious to the scene he was creating. I know I messed up. I know I said things that hurt you. But I was drunk and I didn't mean any of it. You have to know that I didn't mean it. Finally, he was acknowledging what he'd done, even if his acknowledgement was wrapped in excuses and self-pity. You didn't mean it? I repeated, loud enough that everyone in the vicinity could hear. You didn't mean it when you told your friends that if I were prettier you'd marry me? You didn't mean it when you laughed at me? When you encouraged them to mock me? The restaurant had gone completely silent now. Every eye was on us, every ear straining to hear this public drama unfold. Axel's face went pale as he realized what I'd just revealed. Veronica, you're taking it out of context. You're making it sound worse than it was. Am I? I asked, pulling my arm free of his grasp with a sharp motion that probably looked more violent than it was. Am I making it sound worse than sitting in a crowded bar while the man I loved explained to his friends why I wasn't attractive enough to marry? Am I exaggerating the way you all laughed when I walked away? A woman at a nearby table gasped audibly. I could see James half rising from his chair, probably preparing to intervene if necessary. It wasn't like that, Axel said desperately. You're drunk too. You're not remembering it right. But I wasn't drunk. I was stone cold sober and my memory was perfect. I'm remembering it exactly right, I said, my voice carrying the kind of calm authority that made people believe every word. I remember every laugh, every cruel comment, every moment of humiliation. And I remember thinking that if this is how the man I love treats me when he thinks I can't fight back, what does that say about who he really is? The audience was completely on my side now. I could see it in their faces, the way they were looking at Axel with disgust and at me with sympathy and admiration. A beautiful woman being publicly degraded by a drunk ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept that she'd moved on. It was a narrative everyone could understand and rally behind. That's not who I am, Axel said, but his voice lacked conviction. You know that's not who I am, Veronica. Actually, I said, stepping back to put more distance between us, I think that's exactly who you are. I think the man who mocked me in front of his friends is the real Axel Landon. Everything else was just pretense. I could see Easton and Miles approaching from the bar, probably realizing that their friend was drowning and needed rescue. But it was too late. The damage was done. Sir, came a new voice, the restaurant manager summoned by the commotion. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is between me and my girlfriend, Axel said, turning toward the manager with belligerent confusion. I'm not your girlfriend, I said clearly. I haven't been your girlfriend for 4 months. And I never will be again. The finality in my voice seemed to penetrate his alcohol-soaked brain. I watched the hope drain from his eyes, replaced by something harder and more desperate. You can't mean that, he said. After everything we had together after 5 years, you can't just throw it all away because of one stupid night. I didn't throw it away, I replied. You did. The night you decided that humiliating me in front of your friends was more important than protecting the heart I'd given you. The restaurant manager was joined by a security guard, and I could see this was about to escalate in ways that would only make Axel look worse. Go home, Axel, I said, not without compassion. Sleep this off. And then maybe think about the kind of man you want to be, because the man standing here right now isn't someone anyone should love. As security escorted him and his friends toward the exit, I stood there in the center of the restaurant, every eye still on me. I probably should have felt embarrassed by the public nature of the confrontation, but instead I felt something like relief. The truth was finally out there, witnessed by dozens of people who would remember this night and spread the story. By tomorrow, everyone would know that Axel Landon was the kind of man who publicly humiliated his girlfriend and then couldn't understand why she left him. James appeared at my elbow, his face full of concern and barely suppressed anger. Are you okay? He asked quietly. I'm fine, I said and meant it. I think I'd like to go home though. As he helped me gather my things and escorted me out of the restaurant, I caught sight of my reflection in one of the windows. The woman looking back at me had color in her cheeks and fire in her eyes. She looked like someone who had just won a battle she'd been fighting for months. She looked like someone who was finally ready for the war to end. The restaurant incident created exactly the ripple effect I'd hoped for, but its consequences reached further and deeper than even I had anticipated. Within 24 hours, the story had spread through our mutual social circles like wildfire, each retelling adding details and commentary that painted Axel in increasingly unflattering light. Sarah called me Sunday morning, her voice full of shock and sympathy. "Veronica, I just heard about last night. Are you okay? I can't believe Axel would do something like that." "I'm fine," I assured her. "But Sarah, what you heard last night, that wasn't the first time. That's what our relationship was really like toward the end. That's why I left." The strategic revelation hit its mark. Sarah had always been fond of Axel, had always thought he was charming and funny. Now she was reassessing every interaction she'd witnessed between us, looking for signs she'd missed. "By God," she whispered. "I feel so stupid. I actually encouraged you to get back together with him. I thought he was heartbroken." "He's not heartbroken," I said gently. "He's embarrassed. He's angry that I moved on instead of waiting around for him to decide I was worth loving. There's a difference." By Monday, the story had reached my workplace, though in a version that was even more favorable to me. According to office gossip, I'd been publicly harassed by a drunk ex-boyfriend who couldn't accept that I'd rejected him, and I'd handled the situation with grace and dignity. James stopped by my office first thing Monday morning. "I wanted to check on you," he said, closing the door behind him, "and to apologize for not intervening sooner. I should have stepped in the moment he grabbed your arm." "There was no need," I said. "I can handle myself." "Clearly," he said with a slight smile. "But Veronica, if you're concerned about any ongoing harassment, the firm has resources. We can help with restraining orders, security measures, whatever you need." The offer was both professional and personal, and I found myself genuinely moved by his concern. In another life, under different circumstances, I might have been interested in exploring whatever was developing between us. But I still had work to finish. "I don't think that will be necessary," I said. "But thank you for everything." Tuesday brought the first crack in Axel's family foundation. Carmen called me, her voice shaking with a mixture of anger and betrayal. "Is it true?" she demanded without preamble. "Did Axel really say those things to you? In front of people?" I could have lied, could have softened the truth to protect her feelings. But Carmen was 22 years old enough to understand that the people we love are capable of disappointing us in profound ways. "Yes," I said simply. "It's true." The sound she made was something between a sob and a curse. "I can't believe him. I can't believe I've been trying to get you to forgive him when he did that to you. Carmen, you were being a good sister. You love him and you wanted to help. There's nothing wrong with that." "There's something wrong with him though, isn't there?" she said, and I could hear the painful process of disillusionment in her voice. "This isn't the first time, is it? He's always been like this and I just never wanted to see it." I didn't answer directly, but my silence was answer enough. "I'm so sorry, Veronica. I'm so sorry for what he did to you, and I'm sorry for pestering you to give him another chance. If I'd known, you would have done the same thing," I said. "Because you're a kind person who believes in redemption and second chances. Don't let his failures make you cynical." Wednesday brought the call I'd been expecting. Juanita crying. "Veronica, sweetheart, I heard about what happened at the restaurant. And Carmen told me. She told me what Axel really did to you." Her voice was broken in a way that made my chest tight with unexpected emotion. "I raised him better than that," she continued. "I don't know where I went wrong, but I raised him to respect women, to be kind, to be decent. I don't understand how he could do such a thing." "Mrs. Landon," I said gently, "this isn't your fault. You did raise him to be better. Sometimes people choose to ignore what they've been taught. I keep thinking about all the times you came to Sunday dinner, all the times you helped me in the kitchen, all the times you listened to Carmen talk about her problems. You were like a daughter to me, and he threw that away for what? To impress his friends." The pain in her voice was real and deep, and for the first time in months, I felt genuinely sorry for the collateral damage my revenge had caused. "I don't blame you," I told her. "I don't blame Carmen. This is between Axel and me." "But it's not just between you and him anymore, is it?" she said with a clarity that surprised me. He's made it everybody's business. And now we all have to live with knowing what kind of man he really is. Thursday brought the most interesting development yet. A call from Easton. Veronica, he said, his voice carefully neutral. I think we need to talk. Do we? I asked, genuinely curious about what he could possibly want to say to me. About what happened at the restaurant. About other things. I'm listening. Look, I know you're angry about that night at O'Malley's. I know we all said things we shouldn't have said. But this has gone too far. Axel is falling apart and you're destroying his reputation over something that happened months ago. The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, even after everything, he was trying to make me the villain in this story. I'm not destroying anything, I said calmly. I'm simply telling the truth when people ask. Axel destroyed his own reputation the night he decided to mock me in public. But you're making it sound worse than it was. You're acting like we attacked you or something. We were just drunk guys talking trash. It didn't mean anything. It meant something to me, I replied. And it should have meant something to Axel. The fact that neither of you understood that says everything I need to know about what kind of men you are. Come on, Veronica. You're a smart woman. You know how guys talk when they're drinking. You know we didn't really mean any of that stuff. This was my opportunity to educate him, to explain exactly why his dismissal of their cruelty was part of the problem. But I'd moved beyond the need to change minds or seek understanding from men like Easton. Here's what I know, I said instead. I know that when people show you who they really are, you should believe them. And that night all three of you showed me exactly who you are. The fact that you can't understand why that matters tells me everything I need to know. So what, you're never going to forgive him? You're just going to hold this grudge forever. This isn't about forgiveness, Easton. This is about consequences. Axel made choices and now he has to live with the results of those choices. Just like I had to live with the result of loving someone who thought I wasn't good enough for him. The conversation ended shortly after that, with Easton muttering something about women being impossible to please, and hanging up. But I could tell from his tone that the solidarity between the three friends was beginning to fracture. When things got difficult, men like Easton and Miles would abandon Axel to save themselves. Friday brought the culmination of everything I'd been working toward. Axel, alone and sober, standing outside my apartment building at 7 a.m. I saw him from my window as I was getting ready for work. He looked terrible, unshaven, rumpled, with the hollow-eyed appearance of someone who hadn't been sleeping well. He was just standing there, staring up at my building, probably gathering courage for whatever final gesture he was planning. Part of me wanted to ignore him, to slip out the back entrance and avoid the confrontation entirely. But I realized that would be cowardice on my part. If this was going to end, it needed to end properly. I went downstairs and met him on the sidewalk. Hello, Axel. He turned toward me and I was shocked by how much he'd changed in just the few days since the restaurant. He looked years older, diminished in some fundamental way. Veronica, he said, his voice hoarse. Thank you for coming down. I wasn't sure you would. What do you want? I want to apologize. Really apologize, not the half-hearted excuses I've been making. I want to tell you that I understand what I did wrong and I want to ask if there's any way, any possibility. There isn't, I said before he could finish. There's no possibility of reconciliation, Axel. That died the night you chose to humiliate me for entertainment. But I love you, he said, and there were tears in his eyes now. I know I didn't show it properly, I know I took you for granted, but I do love you. I've always loved you. No, I said firmly. You loved having me. You loved having someone devoted to you, someone who made you feel important and desired. But you didn't love me because love protects. Love honors. Love doesn't invite an audience to witness someone's destruction. He was crying now, openly and without shame, and I felt something twist in my chest that might have been the last remnants of the love I'd once felt for him. I know, he whispered. I know I failed you. I know I was cruel and selfish and stupid. But people can change, Veronica. I can change. I can be better. Maybe you can, I said, and I meant it. Maybe someday you'll learn to love someone properly, to treat them with the respect they deserve. But that person isn't going to be me. Why not? He asked desperately. Why can't it be you? Who knows me better? Who could help me become better? And there it was, the final fatal revelation of his character. Even in his moment of supposed enlightenment, he was asking me to take responsibility for his growth, to sacrifice my own healing to help him become the man he should have been all along. Because I'm not your rehabilitation project, I said. I'm not responsible for teaching you how to be decent. That's work you have to do yourself. But I don't know how, he said, and the admission was both heartbreaking and infuriating. I don't know how to be better without you. Then figure it out, I replied. The same way I had to figure out how to rebuild my self-worth after you tore it down. The same way I had to learn to trust my own judgment again after you made me question everything I thought I knew about love. I could see him struggling with the concept that his emotional growth wasn't my responsibility, that love didn't mean endless forgiveness for repeated cruelty. I'm asking you to have mercy, he said finally. I'm asking you to give me one more chance to prove that I can love you the way you deserve. And I'm telling you that some chances once lost don't come again, I replied. Some trust once broken can't be repaired. You had 5 years to love me properly, Axel. 5 years to choose kindness over cruelty, respect over humiliation, privacy over public spectacle. You chose differently every time. That's not true, he protested. We had good times. We were happy. We had moments, I corrected. Moments between your casual cruelties, your subtle put-downs, your constant suggestions for how I could be better, prettier, more worthy of your affection. I was happy because I didn't understand that love wasn't supposed to feel like a constant audition. The words hit him like physical blows. I could see him recognizing the truth of what I was saying, remembering instances where he'd diminished me in ways that had seemed harmless at the time. I didn't know, he said weakly. You didn't want to know, I replied. Because knowing would have required you to change, and change is hard. It was easier to condition me to accept less than I deserved. We stood there in the morning light, two people who had once planned a future together, now separated by a chasm of hurt and understanding that couldn't be bridged. So this is it, he asked. This is really the end? This is the end, I confirmed. And Axel? Don't contact me again. Don't send gifts, don't show up at places where I'll be. Don't ask mutual friends to intervene on your behalf. Let me move forward with my life. And if I can't? He asked, and there was something desperate and slightly threatening in his tone. What if I can't just let you go? For the first time since I'd come downstairs, I felt a flicker of something like fear. But it was quickly replaced by a cold anger that surprised me with its intensity. Then you'll learn the difference between losing someone through your own choices and losing someone through consequences you can't control, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried more menace than any shout. Because if you continue to harass me, if you continue to make my life difficult, I will make sure everyone who matters in your world knows exactly what kind of man you are. Your coworkers, your clients, your extended family, every woman you might ever want to date. They'll all know the story of how Axel Landon publicly humiliated the woman who loved him. The threat was clear, and judging by the way his face paled, it was effective. You wouldn't, he said. Try me, I replied. I've rebuilt myself once after your cruelty. I'm stronger now than I was then. But you're weaker. More desperate. More dependent on other people's opinions for your self-worth. So ask yourself, in a war of attrition, who do you think would win? He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him recognizing that the woman in front of him was not the same person he'd destroyed in O'Malley's bar. This version of me was harder, smarter, more ruthless. This version of me had learned to protect herself by any means necessary. I understand, he said quietly. Good. I turned to walk back into my building, then paused. Axel? For what it's worth, I hope you do learn to be better. Not for my sake, but for yours. And for the sake of whoever you love next. As I climbed the stairs back to my apartment, I heard him call my name one last time. Veronica. I didn't turn around, but I stopped. I really did love you, he said. However badly I showed it, however much I failed at it, I did love you. I know, I said without looking back. That's what makes this so tragic. 6 months later, I'm sitting in my corner office at Morrison & Associates, reviewing the final details of a campaign that will probably earn me another promotion. The afternoon sun streams through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the awards on my walls and the fresh flowers on my desk. Flowers I bought for myself because I've learned the importance of not waiting for someone else to celebrate my achievements. I'm not the woman I was a year ago. That woman believed that love meant accepting less than she deserved, that loyalty meant enduring humiliation, that forgiveness meant enabling cruelty. That woman thought her worth was determined by someone else's opinion of her appearance, her value measured by someone else's willingness to claim her. This woman knows better. I've learned that real strength isn't the ability to endure pain, it's the wisdom to refuse to accept it. I've learned that self-respect isn't something you can lose and then find again. It's something you choose to maintain, every day with every decision you make about what you'll tolerate and what you won't. I've learned that revenge, properly executed, isn't about causing pain. It's about allowing people to experience the natural consequences of their choices. Axel kept his word. He hasn't contacted me since that morning outside my apartment. According to mutual friends, he's in therapy now, working through what Sarah delicately describes as some personal issues. His relationship with his family has improved, though it took months of honest conversations and genuine remorse on his part. Easton and Miles, predictably, distanced themselves from him once his behavior started reflecting poorly on them. Fair-weather friends rarely survive the storms they help create. I don't feel sorry for any of them. I do feel proud of myself, though. Proud of how I handled their cruelty, proud of how I rebuilt my life, proud of the woman I've become. I'm not bitter or broken or defined by what was done to me. I'm stronger, wiser, more discerning about who I allow into my life and how I allow them to treat me. I've been dating James for 3 months now. He's kind, respectful, and seems to genuinely appreciate the woman I am rather than wishing I were someone else. When he compliments my appearance, it's in addition to complimenting my intelligence, my humor, my achievements. When he introduces me to people, he talks about my work, my accomplishments, my thoughts on various subjects. He treats me like a complete person rather than an ornamental accessory to his life. It's a revelation being with someone who doesn't see your love as a commodity to be taken for granted or a prize to be won through manipulation. James earns my affection every day through his words and actions, just as I earn his. This is what healthy love looks like, I realize. This is what I should have demanded all along. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd had the self-respect at 21 that I have now. Would I have recognized Axel's subtle manipulations early enough to walk away? Would I have demanded better treatment from the beginning? Would I have saved myself years of conditioning and months of recovery? But those questions are pointless now. I can't change the past, but I can use it to inform my future. I can let it make me wiser rather than bitter, stronger rather than broken. My phone buzzes with a text from James. Still on for dinner tonight? I made reservations at that new place you wanted to try. I smile as I type back. Absolutely. Can't wait to see you. This is what it feels like to be chosen by someone who actually knows your worth. This is what it feels like to be loved properly. The old Veronica might have felt guilty about her happiness, might have wondered if she deserved it after what she'd done to Axel. But the woman I am now understands that taking care of yourself isn't cruelty, it's necessity. That demanding respect isn't selfish, it's healthy. That walking away from people who diminish you isn't giving up, it's growing up. I've learned that some people come into your life to teach you what love is, and others come to teach you what it isn't. Axel taught me what it isn't, and in doing so he prepared me to recognize and appreciate what it is. For that, in some twisted way, I'm almost grateful. Almost. As the sun sets over the city, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I gather my things and prepare to leave the office. I have dinner with a man who loves me properly, friends who respect me completely, and a career that challenges and fulfills me. I have a life I built from the ashes of someone else's cruelty, and it's beautiful. I am enough. I have always been enough. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve a place in my story. The woman I am now knows this with absolute certainty, and she will never forget it again.